down on them, and, all these artificial expectations that are attached to young girls. They have to be a size 2, and they have to be this, and they have to be that.
Yep.
It's just unbelievable, right? So a lot of those children don't get out of that so easily, right? There's a lot of complexity associated with that. So fast forward from that generation, my daughter's generation, your daughter's generation, let's project 10 years ahead. So the average child that your daughters are going to high school with, and that my daughter went to high school with, most of them are going to have problems. I mean, I think that's a fair thing to say. So as you look at building a platform and sort of an ideology moving forward, how do you see that evolution for these young girls? I mean, you've had to have thought about this because of your own daughters and their friends. I know they have to have some friends that are, that are either doing drugs or suicidal, or, I mean, there's no high school that doesn't have somebody with that. Moving forward and looking at the problems that you face as a young girl and that you see as a parent, what's your sense of what this is going to be like for these young women moving into
it scares me. God, no, it really, I think about it a lot. It scares me. It scares me because some of the kids that are my older daughter, not so much, because she's already a senior, she's graduating, but it's still around in her age bracket, of course. It really, I gotta tell you something, it's stemming from the parents, and it is. I mean, if you had every parent that was telling, I mean, listen, we can't control the world, but if you had every parent, raising their kids in a way that was respectful of each other and showed honesty and trust and self-love and all the characteristics that we all wish that each of our kids would have and display to other children. I mean, you'd have a different generation, but we don't. I mean, social media is the number one thing that's killing everybody. That's killing all of their self-esteem. And how can a parent it's an uphill battle for a parent to fight against that, because they're seeing size 0 models. They're seeing parties where the girls are scantily clad at 12 years old, looking like they're 16. I mean, they see that because it's all over social media. You'd have to put your child in a cave and never give them a phone or a TV not to see it. So, my parents always taught me personally, and maybe that's why I'm the way that I am, that it's not dependent on the weather, whether your house blows down or not. It's depending on what the structure is, how good the foundation is. You need to build a house, which is your self-esteem and your self-love and your self-respect. Your core has to be built strong in order to weather all adverse weather. Meaning, you got to just give these kids a lot of love, a lot of boundaries, and really stay on top of them. Stay really, really on top of them, and make sure that they, understand who they are and they love themselves. And that way, no matter what comes their way, they can be strong enough not to get blown down. Like the 3 wolves, or the 3. Remember that story?
Right. I mean, I've actually used the metaphor of the 3 little pigs in writing about
the 3 little pigs, right?
The house of bricks, the house of straw, and that whole thing. And, I remember the Bratz dolls, the Bratz dolls for little girls, right? I mean, they're, again, kind of sexualized images for 5-year-olds. So it's complicated. And I want to shift gears just a little bit. As women trying to deal with their creativity, because Buddha Barbie, from my understanding and what I've read, And it is also about women finding ways to create their own lives and to develop skills to do that. So for women who may feel, and I hope this is a fair question, for women who may feel sort of tentative about trying to make changes in their lives, they don't feel that if they build it, it will work. What would you say to women that are a little nervous about embracing change, that are reluctant because they fear that they can't? And what would you say to them?
Well, I would explain that they're not, I understand it. Making a change and being really creative and stepping outside of the box, you're asking for a lot of chitter-chatter. Do you know what I'm saying? You're asking to be different. And being different is something that is so uncomfortable for so many women. It really is. I mean, they would rather just form a line, follow each other, you know, do the same thing as the other person. I would really have to say you cannot care what other people think. That would be the line that I will say over and over and over and over. I would tell somebody that wants to step out of the box, that wants to be creative, that wants to do something different, take a chance. You know, you can't see where you're going to go unless you take a chance. I mean, there's no harm in trying. But, you know, I think we're all afraid of failure. I think all of us. I mean, I think that was a big thing for me, too. I'm not going to sit there. You know, I can identify with every other woman. When I started my blog, I was so petrified. And I remember the day it came out, not one, I went to a school function for my son and one for my daughter, and I knew every parent had read it because it went viral, but not one parent would say anything to me. Not one parent. And
that's interesting.
Pardon?
I said that's interesting to me.
Yeah, not one person. And I remember feeling like everybody was talking about it in the school, but nobody, not one person, not one even woman. You know, here women are supposed to build each other up, you know, and help each other thrive. And if more women did that, you'd be less afraid if you felt more camaraderie and more kinship and you know, amongst your peers of women. But I remember sitting in the bleachers watching my daughter's concert and her band concert, and literally I could see everybody whispering. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of parents, and nobody would say a word to me until the very end as I was walking out with my daughter. A father said to me, "Hey, Karen, I just wanted to let you know, because you were at the band concert, you missed your son's game, and I wanted you to know he did great. He made a couple home runs. He's on his way home. He was with a carpool." And he looked at me, he said, "But nobody could concentrate on the game because everybody was talking about BuddhaBarbie." And the wife took her hand and shoved him. Like, I remember her in front of me and said, "Don't you say that, shut up." Like in front of me, and I just looked at them and I said, I hope you guys like it, and I left. But that's what women have to. I'm somebody that it didn't bother. And I mean, I'm a strong woman, and it did kind of like give me a little nudge, but not enough to flicker. I can imagine how other women would feel trying to do something. So it's about finding people, I guess, in your core that'll stand in your corner. You know, having strong people in your corner and not caring what other people think.
Yeah, and that's easier said than done, we know. But, I mean, I agree with that. You know, I had just written today, and I'm going to read it because it's short, something I wrote. And I write stuff like this pretty much all the time. A very strong theme of late with clients showing up in my world deals with women stepping into their full power. And many times the biggest hurdle they face is the restrictive nature of their interactions with other women. I've said it 50 million times, but it's worth repeating. What is the greatest secret to personal transformation? Not believing in limitation. And what is the greatest secret and limiting the destructive power of believing in limitations, choosing your friends as opposed to passively inheriting them. And when you are a parent in a public or private school, you inherit a lot of friends. And so you have to kind of deal with that. Zita, you're being very quiet this evening. What do you think of all this?
You know, everything she's saying is absolutely correct. And I grew up in a different generation than she did. And I grew up in a family of women. We had no men in our family. So to talk about empowering women, my mother was the poster child for empowerment. She started out, in fact, how she got the job that I'm going to mention is she went in and told the owner of the company that he was going to hire her, and that was it. She said, "I will give you 3 months minimum wage. If I don't turn the department around, you can fire me." She went and she went into the back room, set up her own office, got all of her stuff. She took care of it all. And from the time she started as a temp receptionist, within 10 years, she became one of the top 10 businesswomen in the state of Minnesota. That's how much empowerment she has. The best advice that I can give to any woman or a child is, and I live this advice, it's you can get down and play dirty with the boys. Just don't put your feet on the desk with them. That's a huge statement. It's you have to learn how to play that game, but it doesn't mean you have to play the game. Women are much more clever than men are. I don't think women give themselves enough credit for that because they're constantly, from the time they're young, told they can't because they're, as you said, they're pigeonholed. If you take yourself out of that hole, you can do anything you want to do.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I mean, the problem with that, of course, is if you're stuck in a pigeonhole and it's reinforced that that's where you belong, it takes a lot to walk out of that.
It took me 50
because there's so many messages. I mean, this is really the whole focus of this evening is women who are on the receiving end of those messages in whatever context they come. You're too pretty, you're too ugly, you're too fat, you're too thin, you're too tall, you're too short, you're too something. That they are stereotyped, bombarded with these messages, which I've always said are designed by, I'm just going to say it, by men because they're afraid of women's power.
Absolutely.
I agree. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And so for women who are probably really the more powerful of the two, when they have a culture that is so pervasive in trying to suppress that power, that's the reason I wanted to talk with Karen and with Shannon, in the second hour, is I see both of them as being fairly successful in sidestepping a lot of those restrictions and beyond that, and bringing people along with them who may have dealt with that. Because I think it's, I write about this all the time. It's a world that men have created for men, right? So, when you look at religions that the women are supposed to be subservient to the men, that's written by man, right? So, in order to have women really step into their true, authentic power, there's a lot of cultural, motifs here that just keep smacking them in the head. And that's why I think it's what Karen's talking about. It's not so easy for them to move through that. And that's the beauty of, I think, Karen's work and Shannon's work is that it is hopefully helping grease the wheel for women to take those steps so that they can get on that path towards embracing their own power. And to do that, I think they have to embrace the legitimacy of having that power, which I think is taken from them from the time they're two. Personally, that's my own opinion, but that's what I think.
I agree, but Andy, I think that men, I think that there are a lot of men, that there's an all boys club,